Hi everyone, so the latest patch 1.4.2 has been live for a few days and I keep getting a lot of questions from rogue players about why does their character feel so weak. And most of the time they are playing Heartseeker, so I want to clarify a few things that may help you to understand what's going on. So what happened in the patch is that Blizzard has decided to fix duration-based affixes to not double scale with masterworking. So previously what was happening is, you see this here, this chance to make enemies vulnerable, lucky hit effect. That was a pretty powerful mod that, for example, for the Heartseeker rogues was pretty relevant as well, because you need to make enemies vulnerable in order to deal any damage. And that affix was scaling in two ways when you upgraded it or got a greater affix. First, the chance goes up, and then the duration also goes up. So I got a double benefit, and that has been patched so that it's not omega valuable to go for this aspect and upgrade it to the maximum. So this brings it more in line with the value that you get from other affixes, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, a lot of builds were relying on this, like the Heartseeker Rogue, and now suddenly have less vulnerable uptime. And this is actually pretty significant because, for example, if your character was not really fully decked out and has high attack speed, high lucky hit, and maybe like a high chance to make enemies vulnerable like this, well, if you don't make enemies vulnerable, you're not going to do damage because of the victimized key passive. There's not a Heartseeker Rogue right now, but either way, the same applies. In fact, when I was playing Heartseeker with my previous rogue, I had a pretty decked out character, I had fully masterwork gear, and I still felt that, especially when I went to like higher tiers where stuff was living a little bit longer and the 3 seconds of the exploit glyph vulnerable would fall off here and there, it didn't feel that comfortable and consistent enough, even with a pretty good character, to the point where I just went with the standard solution, which is a Cursed Touch. So if you go over the Heartseeker planner here, for example, a lot of people have been following this based on my video that I put out like 2 weeks back or something. I really like using a Cursed Touch, but you have to give up an offensive aspect slot for it. So that's a bit of a bummer, but it allows you to just not run that affix and you have guaranteed vulnerable on everything for the entire fight as soon as you hit them, basically. Which is kind of nice, especially on the higher tiers where sometimes fights are a little bit less linear, a little bit more hectic, and you have to maybe dodge around, run around, monsters come after you, and it's very easy for this vulnerable effect to fall off if it only lasts a few seconds. But this one is permanent and kind of just solves all of your issues. So that's why I have it in a planner, and that's as my standard recommendation. If you feel like you have a lot of vulnerable damage uptime, you can see this as well in the game. You can look at the monsters, you can see the purple health bars. This means they're vulnerable. And if that is not the case, you don't deal damage. So in that case, yeah, either try to work on that vulnerable proc or work on your attack speed, work on your lucky hit. All of these things help you to improve the vulnerable uptime that you get, for example, from this affix. But I think it might just be a best solution for most people to go for the Cursed Touch aspect instead. There's a bunch of aspects that you can kind of drop easily. For example, you know, you don't really need like an elements aspect. You don't necessarily need to go for like an inner calm aspect or so. I actually do have inner calm here. I think there's no elements right now, for example. So there are some aspects that are just not that crazy. And I decided, at least for myself, it was fine to just go with a Cursed Touch and I don't have to worry about this. Now, there's another note that I want to bring in here, since we're talking about Heartseeker rogues, which is the topaz choice of gems in the weapons. So some people ask me, why do we run topazes? Other people ask me, why do we not run all topazes? Well, let's go into the math a little bit on this. So the answer for this is, well, the topaz gems give you more basic damage, but the vulnerable damage gems, they have a lower value, but they also scale the key passive. And there comes a point where those two effects kind of break even. Meaning that if you reach a certain very high vulnerable damage value, eventually the extra additive damage that you can gain from those topazes are actually outweighing the extra scaling on the key passive. However, that number is a pretty high value, and it also depends a little bit on the exact distribution of stats on your gear, and you know how much additive damage you have exactly from your Paragon board and so on. And for example, for this planner that I was putting out here, I did the math on this. And it turns out you need a lot of vulnerable damage. You see here, this planner shows 1500% vulnerable damage. In fact, it's actually 1243%, but thanks to Blizzard math, we reach 1500%. So this is actually an inaccurate number, but this is actually what Victimize scales off. So that's actually bugged in another way that goes beyond the double dipping stuff. It just scales off a too high value based on the math that goes on behind the scenes, which is inaccurate in the tooltip. Either way, around 1500% vulnerable is kind of the cutoff here, where I would say this is like a good rule of thumb, where if you're standing in town without the malice passive that also outside of town goes into this number, 1500% in town is kind of where you can start putting some Tobases into your weapons, basically. However, again, this depends on the exact stats that you have. So you may have like, not exactly planar gear, and you may not have even like, like this exact distribution of stats, like the vulnerable damage here, and, maybe you have like a random, percent damage roll on the ring, or maybe a paragon board looks a bit different. You have a few different stats, or one of your glyphs is not maxed. All these things kind of play a role here, but there's not really a perfect like formula I can give you to say, okay, Topases are always better under these circumstances, and vulnerable is always better under those. However, for this planner, it turned out that roughly this was the number, and where we have the cutoff with Topases, like 2-2, for example, or I can also do like 3-1, or I can even do 4-0. So that depends a little bit. But for early game, like early progression, vulnerable damage gems are absolutely the choice here, just to make sure that you can scale up that victimize key passive first. And then when you have very good gear, this is the time to maybe put a Topaz or 2 or 3. This is kind of how that goes. Now there is one last thing that I want to put in this video here, which is for the rapid fire enjoyers. And apparently Blizzard is going to do a third fix to rapid fire in the mid-season update, which is coming very soon, it seems. So as the recording of the video, we don't have any news on this just yet. However, supposedly they're coming this week based on this tweet here by Adam Fletcher a few days ago, actually. So we should be hearing about that. And maybe they're gonna reinstate the original behavior of the Scoundrel's Kiss ring. So we'll see about this, but when people asked about it, apparently something is coming here. So rapid fire is gonna still be one of the top dogs, I guess. And we also have no word on a potential victimize fix for the double dipping, which would definitely bring down the power of Heartseeker and yeah, potentially Penshot as well to like more reasonable levels, and then making rapid fire the clear winner on Rogue right now. However, we'll see. Maybe they're not gonna change it mid-season, and it's gonna be something for season 5, for example. But I guess at the very latest, and in season 5, we're gonna see a change there. Either way, some important updates for the rogues here. I'm gonna keep you guys posted with more stuff that is coming. So especially when those mid-season updates notes roll in, you can be expecting a video from me, and we'll see what will be in there. I'm quite excited to see what it will bring back from season 3. Hopefully Malphas and some cool items and some cool new aspects or something. So there might be some nice goodies. That's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this little video, and see you guys next time.